Sure, you can derail the campaign, if you ask nicely. I'm telling this story here because my friends are tired of hearing it. To keep it as short as possible, I'll hit the high and low lights of the story, as he was actually quite boring as a player. It was back in the olden times of AD&D, in the late 80s, and I was running the latest iteration of a campaign I had inherited when I was in high school. So the world was large and well established. I had a good group of 2 friends I'd been playing with since middle school, and my wife with other people cycling through. This is the story of one of those players, the Highlander Samurai. One of my friends met a couple of guys who played D&D and were interested in playing with us. The campaign was currently in a large city like Paris or London, where magic was a common everyday thing. Flintlocks abounded, and the main fighter class was a duelist. One of the guys was real excited to play a duelist, but the other guy wasn't into Eurocentric characters, so I said, "You got a character in mind?" To keep things interesting, I would let people bring in their characters from other campaigns, and this guy showed me this character he'd been playing. When I looked at it, I was like, Oriental Adventures, what the fuck? He was jonesing to play his weird Christopher Lambert clone in our Musketeer-style game. The information was much of the same as a standard D&D sheet, and there were things on it I was unfamiliar with, not owning a copy of OA rulebook, but there wasn't anything on it that I couldn't work around. He had the usual buffed-out character with a noble background, which was par for the course. What really caught my eye were his character's description and his special martial arts attack. The character was 6'2", 280 pounds, and from the waist up, he dressed like a Scottish laird, which fit in quite nicely as there was a region near the city that was similar to Scotland. But from the waist down, he dressed like a samurai, with colorful hakama and exquisite daisho with tabi and clogs. So he basically looked like a man wearing a skirt and slippers to the people of the city, as 99.99% of them had never been more than a day's travel from their homes. Looks aside, he had an attack that was an OP version of Flurry of Blows. That was 10, yes 10 strikes, as a single attack once an encounter. I took one look at this madness and said, "See you Saturday." I had to see how he played this character. So we all meet, and I go over some important history the new characters needed to understand how the city politics worked, as the campaign was heavy on intrigue. HS immediately tries to derail the campaign by asking, "Can we play in Japan?" I informed him that there was no place called Japan in this world, and the closest thing was a region called Cathay. So he asked if we could play there, to which I said, "If you can find your way there, sure." I have no problem with player yanking the story somewhere else, but they have to find a legit purpose for the change. I'll admit, I did start to consider what he would need to do to get the players on the opposite side of the globe, but he was going to have to earn it. So HS saunters in the city to rendezvous with the other characters, and he's moving along with the new real problems, just the occasional odd look, when I roll a random encounter with a street gang. It's just a handful of kids that start taunting HS, and just being nasty to distract him while his pocket gets picked. His reaction to this is to turn on his heel, and in a prissy manner, tell the teen boys to respect their elders, and then turn his back on them, and proceeded to walk away. I run my campaign with the rules, actions have consequences. So the lead punk kicks him in the back. Note, doing 1 HP non-lethal damage. HS turns around and, like a good anime character, calls out he's doing his flurry of blow attacks with his fists. I asked him if he was sure he wanted to do that, and he insisted he did. So I told him to roll his attack, and without looking at the NPC's stats, I announced he'd hit, because whatever his roll was because there was no way he could miss without rolling a 1. He proceeded to roll 10d4 of damage. He dropped that fist die and announced, "That's 3 points of damage." "He's dead," I said. "Keep rolling." "What? He can't be dead." "He is, and keep rolling." With each die roll, I described in gruesome detail the boy's ribs cracking and jaw dislocating and bones breaking till the 10th roll, when I described the battered body quivering for just a moment before crumbling to the ground, where the blood flooded into the contusions, turning the body mass of yellow and purple blotches. HS protested that he thought that he had more hit points than the 2 he had. I didn't keep track of the damage he rolled, but I told him he sure as hell didn't have 40 HP. That's when I informed him that a voice behind him was asking if he would please accompany them. It turns out that he was in front of the city watch keep, and a dozen constables saw the whole thing. He was interrogated and held for about an hour game time, before being released on his own recognize. It was technically self-defense, so he was never in danger of being imprisoned, but he was now on the radar of every cop, good or crooked, in the city. Over the next few months, HS proved to be a pretty ineffectual character. He was a pompous one-trick pony, with no interest in the story, who would drift away from the party to go tavern hopping and ask the staff how to get to Cathay, which none of them could answer, because they never heard of it or only knew stories. Never once did he go to a school or look for a ship's captain where he could find leads that could take him there. I was really disappointed in HS because I'd borrowed a copy of OA and had started planning the trip they would have to take and the mess they would be in when an imposter turned up in their lands claiming to be a lord with no papers to prove it. Also, I was miffed to find that his flurry of blows was nowhere in the book, and it was some poorly crafted martial art created for the character. Still, I decided to throw HS a bone, since the story was coming to an end and the rest of the group was busy cooling the gang war they had accidentally started. I meant it when I said there are consequences to actions, but that was actually a cool story, so I won't go into it here. By chance, during one of HS tavern crawls, he happened on an old sailor who told HS there was a captain in town that traveled to the east. It was actually to the mainland since they were on an island, but HS never asked about that. The clue would lead him to someone that needed work done that would draw them closer to the east. He proceeded to the tavern that was down an alley in the seediest part of the local docks. I don't think he knew of anywhere else to get information, so obliged him. When HS entered, I gave a description of the people in the room, and instead of taking the hint to approach the obvious sailor sitting in the back of the common room, he went to a table where a man in once fine, but now shabby clothes, was sitting, and asked if he could take a seat. I honestly don't think he heard the word shabby. He proceeded to ask his rote question to the high-ranking member of the Thieves' Guild. "Do you know how to get to Cathay?" The NPC stated that information costs, and HS passes the guy 1 silver piece. The NPC scoops up the silver and gives HS the same answer he got from everyone who vaguely knew what he was talking about: by boat. HS asked if he could give him more information, to which the NPC said he could if he could pay. HS went into a spiel about that being all the money he had and had saved for months to get that silver piece. Here's where I was done with HS's lazy antics. His clothes were worth more than any of these men made in a year. His swords could have bought the building, and he was feigning poverty. The NPC would have pointed out the captain if he'd been offered a gold piece. 2, after getting the silver to make up for the insult. Instead, he got up and left, telling HS to come back when he had money. HS did not confirm that this was not his contact or attempt to talk with anyone else. Dejected that he wasted his time, HS walked out of the tavern into the darkened alley and was promptly ambushed by the Thieves' Guild member, who was lying in wait with his gang. HS was beaten unconscious, robbed of all of his valuables except his swords. I'm not a dick. I figured they would be too hard to fence, and his manservant was killed. Oh, did I forget to mention he had a retainer that waited on him, hand and foot, that HS would only remember when he didn't want to do something himself. HS was pissed after this and proceeded to take out his frustrations on the other party members, who refused to pay for his meals and lodging now that he was penniless. It all came to a head when he challenged one of the duelists in the group to wait for it, duel. They both were done with each other, so I condoned it. HS was out no matter what after this, and I figured the duelist could do with letting off some steam. Also, I would recon the whole thing if it didn't go well for the duelist, though I knew it wouldn't. HS got in some good rolls, and he had the duelist on the ropes with about 7 HP left, when he decided to play his one ace in the hole, OP Flurry of Blows. HS rolled his attack and hit with his katana. He then proceeded to roll 10d10, quite pleased with his victory. Now here's where the duelist turned to me, to clarify if his duelist's special abilities applied. I had been waiting for this moment, and replied that it most especially did. I now give you one of the most broken abilities in AD&D, duelist's special abilities, parrying the death blow. Basically, any single weapon attack that can reduce the duelist to 0 hit points can be parried for no damage on a strength save, and duelist was freakishly strong as a class back then. So, before HS could finish rolling damage, I announced that all of his strikes had been parried. HS lost his shit, arguing that there was no way a duelist could parry 10 attacks. I had to remind HS that it was a single attack of 10 strikes on a single target. Therefore, the duelist could parry the 10 strikes of the single attack. It was canon, not homebrew, and he would have known this if he'd been paying attention. And from that point on, it was just a slow fight of attrition, as the duelist was eventually reduced to 4 HP and could apply PTDB on HS every weapon attack, while HS was whittled down to 0 HP. His beloved samurai, cut down by a lowly peasant with a vulgar piece of metal, was too much for HS's player, who grabbed his things and left the table, never to be heard from again. The campaign continued to be unexpected, finally, where the son of the Assassin's Guild leader kills the daughter of the Thieves Guild leader, whom he had married to end the gang war, using her as a sacrifice to open the stairway to the heavens, to sit on the god's head throne and attain godhood. He was thwarted when the soul lizardman, who was immune to his effects, removed the cursed artifact vital to the spell, collapsing the portal, trapping the assassin between worlds. This was a cursed relic sought by the original BBEG, who died in the gang war that was never supposed to happen. I love good derail, but also, alas, we never did make it to Japan. Cathay.